Trade war escalation as the U.S. markets react. So the U.S. and China doubling down on tariffs overnight. In fact, this is a look at how the markets stand after China made some pretty big moves to U.S. exports overnight. So here's your headline there. China decided to boost tariffs on all of those U.S. imports into their country from 84% to a whopping 125%. After a 90-day pause to reciprocal tariffs levied against countries other than China, the president and his team say they are in deal-making mode. So listen to what White House senior counselor for trade and manufacturing, Peter Navarro, had to say about this.
Just say 90 deals in 90 days, biggest, broadest tax cut in American history, should be driving the tape. That's what's going to be a bullish market. And if you're not long, you're going to get left behind. The president has said several times now that he would love to hear from China to talk about where we're at. From our perspective, China's killed over 1 million Americans with deadly fentanyl and related drugs, and it simply refuses to do anything about that. Many of these people are prime-age workers, so they not only kill Americans, they're killing our workforce. At the same time, as you know, Maria, and we talk a lot about this, since 2001, China has destroyed over 60,000 American factories and stolen over 5 million manufacturing jobs. That's the state of play. So all we're asking for is fairness.
Peter Navarro right there. Well, President Donald Trump spending much of his day getting his annual physical. Before heading to Walter Reed Hospital, he posted this to Truth Social, quote, "We are doing really well on our tariff policy. Very exciting for America and the world." 3 exclamation points there. He says, quote, "It is moving along quickly." So in moments, CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady will join us from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, talking in real time to those traders down there who are doing the deals. But first, let's go to CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Weijia, China says they're not afraid of the trade war. In recent days, they have said that they would fight until the end. So what's the reaction at the White House, especially as China raises those stakes?
Well, Reed, so far we haven't heard anything official from the White House or President Trump, who is typically the one to deliver any news about a retaliation on the retaliation, which is how we got to these staggering figures to begin with today, which we know now China has imposed 125% tariffs on American exports in response to the American rate, which is 145%. You can see on your screen here just one little bit of what a top spokesperson said. The U.S. cannot win the support of the people in will and in failure. Now, he also said that the door remains open to talks, but he says it has to be based on mutual respect and equal footing, adding that if the U.S. wants to wage a trade war, as you mentioned, China will fight until the very end. We also know that President Trump wants to negotiate this deal directly with Chinese President Xi Jinping. He doesn't want anyone under him to be doing the legwork, which usually is what happens. But we've talked to several members of his cabinet. Just this morning, we spoke with the top trade official, the U.S. TR, Jamieson Greer, about engagement with China, and they're all saying we're not talking to Beijing because Trump himself wants to broker this deal. And he wants Xi to call first. So, Reed, at some point, someone's got to make a move here, and it doesn't look like either leader wants to back down.
It's like the stare down of all stare downs and wondering who's going to blink first, Weijia. All right, so let's put China aside. And remember, we are in the environment of that 90-day pause on some tariffs for other nations. Are we getting any sense of where we are on agreements with other countries?
Well, we know that the U.S. and Vietnam have agreed to start formal discussions after both the Treasury Secretary and the U.S. Trade Representative had meetings with the leader there. And we also know that the administration sources tell us that there are at least 15 deals that they are very strongly looking at, that they say are almost done, but they have to see if it's good enough to present to President Trump, who himself has talked about how many talks are happening right now. But we also know, Reed, that at the end of that 90-day period, Trump says, you know, all the countries that are now enjoying a pause on those very high reciprocal rates, even though there is a 10% universal tariff on everybody. He says after that period, if there are no new trade deals with a country, they're probably going to face that high rate that they were going to before the pause started. He didn't completely close the door, though, on a possible extension of that pause. He said we'll have to see where we are at that point.
Weijia, while we have you there at the White House, we know that there's reporting the president is having a physical today. The physicals of presidents always making news. We know historically, though, President Trump has bristled at having the results of his physical become up for public discussion or fodder. What do you know about today's event, so to speak?
Yeah, so this is a very standard procedure for all presidents who go to Walter Reed and get a physical done. As you can imagine, there are many tests that have to be done, and on his schedule, 5-hour block is reserved for the president to see his doctor. And you're absolutely right, Reed, in, judging on what we've seen in the past, we really just get the very basics, which include, I'm looking at one from 2020, actually, from the last time the president was here at the White House. It'll have his height, his weight, his resting heart rate, blood pressure, temperature. There might be a few other details, but not really anything extensive. Of course, President Trump himself constantly talks about how healthy he is. In fact, he just posted that today, but he said, these things have to be done. But we haven't really gotten a clear view into his health. What we can report, though, is that sources familiar with the procedure today say because he had a mental cognitive test last year, he will not be doing that this year. Of course, you might remember Trump famously talked about, his mental ability after one of these evaluations when he said he could remember 5 words in a row, where a lot of other people couldn't: man, woman, person, TV, dog. And so he has talked before at length about his mental sharpness, but this year we will not have an actual readout of that, Reed.
All right, Weijia Jiang with a readout on all things tariffs and the president's physical today. Thank you so much for that live report from the White House.